Welcome back to another episode of The Adversity Advantage. I'm your host, Doug Bopst, and today's guest is celebrity trainer Don Saladino. Don is one of the most trusted names in health and fitness and has a reputation for training some of your favorite movie stars. His client roster includes Ryan Reynolds, Hugh Jackman, Sebastian Stan, and Blake Lively. Don's wisdom and expertise on fitness, nutrition, and getting shredded is unmatched, and I think you're really going to enjoy our discussion. So let's get this conversation going and welcome Don Saladino to the Adversity Advantage podcast. Don Saladino, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, brother. Psyched to be on. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to doing this for a long time. I mean, I've been in the industry for 11 years now, and you've been somebody that's been an inspiration to me as a professional, as somebody who's in the space, you've been doing this for a long time, and I just admire what you've created, how you've reinvented yourself, how you also prioritize your family amidst the busyness of our profession, and I think it's quite inspirational.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, no, it's not always easy. It's time management. It's always been a challenge, but fortunately, I have a supportive family, and they allow me to do what I need to do.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's a great thing to have. And we were kind of chatting a little bit before we recorded just about a few things. And one of the things is that you've been on the road like crazy lately. And a lot of people that you coach, a lot of the people that I work with, just people in general, they struggle to not only eat healthy on the road, they struggle with getting proper sleep. They struggle with getting in their workouts. So I'm sure you probably have your own struggles with this, with the own standards you hold yourself to when it comes to your health and fitness. Like, what have been some of your strategies lately with the amount of travel at making sure you're optimizing your health?
Yeah, listen, it gets tough, right? Like, you're out of your comfort zone. You're not traveling with Tupperware. I would be if I was prepping for something, but most of the time, if it's timed out in a way where I don't need to prep with Tupperware, I'm not going away packing boxes of Tupperware and chicken and ice and stuff like that. You're going out to business dinners, you're meeting with people, you got to do your best. You got to sometimes, lean into the culture and what they have to offer a bit. I was just in Munich, Germany. I'm not going to be sitting there asking for chicken and rice, or steamed vegetables. No, you let your hair down. But I think it's that 95% of the year that you really are spot on with everything and really paying attention to digestion and macro and micronutrients and really getting in the things that you need to allow yourself to be successful. I think this now allows you to have a little bit of flexibility when you're on the road. I mean, the one thing that I'll never budge on is I'm always training, right? Like I landed in Munich last Wednesday, and I'm preparing for the GI Go fundraiser, which is a swim from Jersey around the Statue of Liberty and Ellis Island all the way up to South Manhattan. So I had to get into a pool. So, I got into an Uber with my buddy Tiago, who flew in from Portugal to help assist me do some speaking. And we took an hour Uber ride to the Olympic pool in Munich and paid the day pass and jumped in. And I remember looking at the clock, it was 5:15. I was like, all right, I got a good hour of training right now. I got to get it in. And afterwards, it was literally a reset button for me. So I think where a lot of people would say, oh, you know what, I'm tired, I didn't sleep a lot, I'm gonna punt, and my nervous system and my readiness and all this bullshit, right? This is more about, here for me. And it's more about me getting in when I need to get in. And then there's other variables that you just can't control. There's no air conditioning in the hotel. Sleep's going to get disrupted. Like, it's just not, I sleep with the room really cold. You do the best you can. You come back here, you might get sick or something might happen, but then you recover and you repair and you kind of get right back at it. So I think that's probably what I do better than anyone is, I don't look at, days or, veering off path as like, oh, I screwed up or that was a mistake. I just look at that as part of the plan. And then, I'm able to wake up the next day and say, all right, we're back on it. Right? If I have to prep for, the cover of Muscle Fitness or cover Men's Health, or I got something where I'm never really given a lot of time. It's 3-4 weeks for those things. Yeah, 100%. I'm like a robot, and it could be. I remember I had one prep through Christmas, and I'm sitting there in front of my family eating food in a Tupperware, and they're eating pasta and meatballs, and you just do it. It's part of what it is I do, and it's rewarding when you can go through things like that and then see a finished product and feel proud about what you've created.
I think it's a great mindset to have, to just know that this is all, I guess, part of the process. And there's going to be days where you're not able to eat the chicken and rice and vegetables. There's going to be days where you're not going to have perfect sleep or even like the perfect workout. But I think the point is like giving it the best you can and just making sure that you at least know that you gave it your best shot, and then you had fun along the way. And I would say that like a lot of people struggle with this. A lot of people that you've coached have struggled with the fact that they're all or nothing. And they start this plan and they're like, all right, I'm going to eat oatmeal and egg whites for breakfast. I'm going to eat this for lunch, that for dinner. The minute life throws them a curveball and they go off, they're like off to the races for like days, weeks, or months, or just completely. Like, how do you help coach people in that process so that they can adapt a similar mentality? I mean, maybe not as like regimented as you, but a similar mentality, a mentality that just positions themselves that just because they eat a bad meal doesn't mean their plan is going to be screwed up.
Small wins. I call them non-scale victories. And I think explaining to someone early on that, when you're starting your New Year's resolution, like this is not going to be where I want you to try and be perfect for 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks. Because at a certain point, you're going to freak out and you're going to dive into something and you're going to go overboard. And, then you're going to throw your hands up and be like, oh, I messed up. I'm done. Like, again, I think it's understanding, it's creating an expectation of what it is. What do I want them to do? And all I want them to do is improve, right? Like now, if I have a celebrity coming to me and they're like, well, I got to be on this magazine cover or I have to be in this movie role, my shirt's off, then I have 3, 4 weeks. Okay. Different answer to this question. But I think for the majority of people out there who are trying to optimize energy levels, look better naked, optimize recovery and just live their best life, I think understanding that perfection is not even, no one's done it. It's not, think about that. It's like, it's never been done. Like there's not a human being that's never like not cheated off their diet. There's not a human being that's never not had something or maybe one day messed up on macros or missed a meal. It's physically impossible. So I think understanding that like going for this level of perfection is your first mistake, and taking a minimalistic approach sometimes is exactly what people need to do. I mean, we talk about taking a minimalistic approach when training athletes, right? It's, are we trying to beat the living crap out of them? Are we trying to, kill them with volume or kill them with intensity? No, you want to give them the right dosage to where they can enhance their sport and allow them to wake up the next day and feel recovered and bounce back. I think with nutrition, I've seen some pretty incredible progress from people who do not go in there with this 100% all or nothing approach. Funny story, I've told this several times, but had a friend of mine years ago came to me and he was like, I want to see my top 2 abs. And I just started laughing. I'm like, that's the weirdest request I've ever heard in my life. Never heard anyone say that, but he had a good build on him. And he's like, I'm not going to eat like you, but I just want to start seeing definition come in there. And we laid out his diet and we looked at it and I just basically had him, move to like an 80-20. Like we pretty much eliminated a lot of junk, but we still allowed him to have a little bit of it here and there. And he's like, are you sure? I'm like, just trust me and take this approach and let's talk in 3, 4 weeks. And when he came back to me, he took his shirt off and he was, oh my God, look at this. And I was like, wow, like actually worked better than I thought. And then he turned to me, he said the magic words. He's like, well, what's next? And that's what it's about, right? Like, I think a big problem is that people will embark on this health and wellness journey. And when you don't see, it's tough to stay motivated when you don't see progress, right? Or it's tough to stay motivated when you're killing yourself, day in and day out, and you're not feeling like you can have your cake and eat it too. So I think the majority of the people out there are, if they are struggling with this level of consistency, I really do believe that this is 100% mental. This isn't 80% nutrition, 20% training. This is 100% mental. And I think if you feel like you're unable to be successful, I think creating a new expectation is the approach you need to take.
You're spot on, man. I mean, because there's so many people that it's easy to start like some like new health transformation and be perfect for like 2 weeks. But what happens when maybe the scale doesn't move in the way they think it's going to move, or they don't see the definition right away, or they start to feel tired or whatever. I mean, fill in the blank with the things that happen when you start to make a journey or you start to change your health and go on this journey. But then it's like, how do you master the mindset? Like when you hit a plateau, when like the negative BS starts creeping up in your mind, or you're telling yourself you want to quit or what have you. And with that said, so like you've kind of laid out, I guess, like what is a big part of what you do when you coach people to quote unquote get shredded is really to set realistic expectations from like a training perspective, from a nutrition perspective, like for somebody to get ripped, and want to develop a better physique and look better naked, like what kind of things have to happen?
Well, I think first off, it's understanding what their baseline is, right? Because what we might have to apply to you is going to be different than what we have to apply to myself. So I think it's understanding like where are we starting with here and what's their day to day look like? Because there's just so many factors that go beyond diet, right? Yeah. Training has a lot to do with it. People, oh, it's all diet. I'm like, yeah, I'm like, okay. Like it has a lot to do with diet, but training has a lot to do with it. Like it really does. And rest and recovery have a lot to do with it. And stress levels have a lot to do with it. And training age, right? Like how experienced are you? Are you one of these people that have been training for 30 years? And like my buddy Frank Seppi's been on over 500 magazine covers. When he needs to dial something in and get ready for a shoot in 2-3 weeks, it's going to respond a little bit differently than say, your average Joe on the street that do not have that foundation. So I think that's the first thing. It's understanding like, what are we working with here? What are we trying to create? There was a very normal conversation I had with a lot of the actors where they would come into my office and I'd say, all right, we're getting ready for this role. Walk me through what do we need to look like here? And they would pull up pictures of, I've seen everything from Brad Pitt in Fight Club to an Olympic Russian shot putter, right? To, Chuck Webner, who Liev Schreiber trained to look like, who is the real Rocky, right? So I've heard it all. I've had people come into me and it's never always about, dropping body fat. Sometimes it's about putting size on, or sometimes it's about putting body fat on. So I think it's just understanding what are we trying to create, and then mapping out a plan that's going to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Depending on the amount of time, like what do we have to do? If it's someone that doesn't have a good track record of staying consistent, then I think throwing my A game at them is going to be the worst thing to do, right? If it's someone that's just, oh my God, I always struggle and 6 days in, I always fail, then as a coach, you better figure out a way to create something that is going to allow them that level of consistency. If you're Ryan Reynolds and you're, in my eyes, a machine, he's a robot, you could just, say, do this, and he'll put his head down and he'll just do that. Like but a lot of people aren't wired that way to show that level of consistency.
Yeah. I mean, that's like one of the beautiful lessons you learn in the fitness industry is the one plan doesn't work for everybody, and you have to like take it from a very individualistic approach. But I think with that said, there's likely some common themes. I mean, I would imagine that people have to strength train, if they want to put on muscle, right, and burn fat. They have to be in a calorie deficit if they're looking to lose weight or lose body fat, I think, right? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't agree with that. I've battled with plenty of nutritionists out there. Caloric deficits work, but I think also cleaning up the type of calories someone's consuming and showing a level of consistency can improve body composition. If someone is turning around and they're eating a crappy diet of 3,000 calories a day, but one day they're at 3,200, another day they're at 2,300, and there's all this volatility going in. If we get them up to that same level of calories that they were at, and we show a level of consistency, but we kind of dry it out a little bit to where we're not feeding them processed foods, and we got their protein around 1 gram to 1.25 grams per pound of body weight, and then we're regulating, are they a high carb, medium, moderate carb, low carb person? Depends on how they metabolize foods, and where should their fat levels be. But once you find that level of consistency, you'd be shocked on how body composition can change. When I prepped for the 2018 cover of Muscle and Fitness, I did that on 300 grams of carbs a day, 275 grams of protein, and 90 grams of fat. People are like, how did you do that? Well, my body's used to running at 500 grams of carbohydrates. But yeah, then most people would say, well, you are in a deficit. I'm like, I was in a surplus to begin with, for my total daily energy expenditure. So we all have our TDE, which is our total daily energy expenditure. It's a total amount of calories that we burn in a day. So if we're sitting on, as if you're sitting on the couch, your RMR, your resting metabolic rate, is going to show how many calories you're burning at rest. And then you have your activity, and you can figure out from there what's the total amount of calories that you're burning. But I've seen a lot of times when we've just got some consistency into someone's caloric intake, that itself has improved body composition, and they might even lose a little bit of weight in the beginning. I've also had people lose weight from reverse dieting. Someone's coming into you, well, I'm down at 1,000 calories a day, and we find out that their total daily energy expenditure is 2,200. And then we spend the next few weeks bringing up their calories, and they start losing weight. Like, how do you explain that? Like, they're not in a deficit. Like, your body can only be in a deficit so long. Like, you can't, in my opinion, you can't live in a deficit all the time. Like, the body's going to adapt, and you're going to get weak, and sleep quality is going to get affected, and energy level is going to get affected, and things are going to start slowing down, your metabolism, et cetera, et cetera. So we take a reverse dieting approach with a lot of people who have showed this level of inconsistency with their calories. And as we increase their calories, we will see sometimes a body weight drop, or definitely a body composition change.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I guess I've obviously I've heard the caloric deficit approach, and that like a lot of people will say that that has to happen. But I've also found my own experience in eating. When I eat healthier, I tend to look better than if I were just to eat the same amount of calories with eating crap.
All
Right.
calories aren't all calories are not created equal. I don't understand how people still argue this. They're like, well, if you get 3,000 calories through crap food or 3,000 calories through whole, organic, micronutrient dense foods, they don't do the same thing. Like your body's going to spend time trying to detoxify and trying to spend all this time working to rid the body of what is putting yourself under, in my opinion, a level of hormonal stress. You can't, like, when you have crap food and you're putting crappy nutrition in your body's like, whoa, 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 I don't want that, right? So it doesn't make sense to me, like how someone's like, well, if I have 3,000 calories to fast food or 3,000 calories if Don was cooking for me, that's going to be the same. It's not going to be the same. Your body, you're going to sleep better. You're going to have a different levels of recovery. Your skin's going to be better. Your inflammation's going to be better. Like there's all these benefits that are going to come out of that. And I think that's a part of the problem. It's like, oh, this just has 100 calories, 100 calories. I'm like, yeah, but there's no nutritional benefit to the calorie that you're consuming. So, yeah, that's kind of what I wish people would take a little bit of a different approach on, understanding that calories are energy, right? And we can't always remove that energy from our body. And if you're in this deficit for a period of time, you're not losing weight. Well, you can't just keep removing calories. If someone's coming in you and they're consuming 1,000 calories a day, they're like, I'm not losing weight. Like, what are you going to move? 800, 700? Like that's insane. Like, it doesn't make sense to me. Like there's only one way to really go. You can't go down. You got to go up. But I think taking a very methodical approach to how you're going to reverse diet. And I think reincorporating calories in slowly and spending weeks, I'll spend sometimes 5 weeks bringing someone up 1,000 calories, maybe 200 calories a week, which could be 25 grams of protein, 25 grams of carbs, and then maybe another week it's 11 grams of fat, which is, right there, that's 100 calories, and maybe bumping up the carbs and the proteins a little bit also. So yeah, you take a methodical approach to reintroducing calories in, because I'm not going to have someone just reintroduce 1,000 calories in on day one. That's why people get discouraged.
Right. And you brought up a good point that I think everybody needs to hear, and that it's common that people, when they want to get ripped or they want to lose fat or whatever, they'll just cut calories completely. And like you said, they'll get to the point where they're eating like 800-900 calories a day. I was talking to somebody about this like not too long ago, where they were like, I want to like get rid of some belly fat. I want to look better. And I'm like, they're like, well, what should I? And they're like, well, what should I be eating? I'm like, well, what are you eating now? And I had them like track their food. And I'm like, look, you're only eating like 700 calories a day. You're not getting hardly any dietary fiber. You're not getting hardly any protein. Like that's an issue, right? Like, so what do you think it is about like eating like low calories? Like, why does that cause people to kind of plateau a bit? Is it the starvation mode, or do you believe it's something else?
Yeah, no, I believe it's that. I mean, listen, you're trying to run a car without gasoline. Like, how do you expect to demand the level of performance out of your body if you're not putting energy into your body? And like, I think it's really simple to break down, right? You have your three macronutrients. You have your protein, which is your building block, and you have your carbs and your fats, which are both energy sources, right? And I think we start getting into a bit of trouble when we start eliminating one of those energy sources. This is getting into the discussion of metabolic flexibility and talking about, how we allow our bodies to use fats and carbohydrates as energy sources, and allowing our body to use protein to repair muscle. And if you don't have enough of those other macronutrients, your body's going to start taking protein and using that as an energy source. That's an unnatural process, and then I think your entire system gets all out of whack there. I think just a really simple way to put it. But listen, I've thrived off of calories, and I've thrived off of allowing my body nutrition, and I've thrived off of allowing my energy levels to be high. And I've always kept single digit body fat all year long from consuming a very healthy, well-rounded diet of animal protein, but where are they sourced from, of slow burning carbohydrates, of an array of vegetables. They're very dense in micronutrients, fiber, things that are my body. It's very important for digestion. So yeah, when you start starving yourself, your body's smart. It's just going to adapt. And then it's just going to say, well, we don't have the calories. You don't have the energy that your body needs. Slow down. And that's when things start going bad.
Right, right. Because it's like typically what I've seen, and I hate to be like a stickler for this, but people will be like, here's what I'm eating. And I'm like, you realize that 20% of your calories came from like alcohol, like 2 glasses of wine, which I forget how much it would be, but it was like 200 calories or something. And they're eating 1,000 calories a day. Like 20% of your calories comes from alcohol. And they're like, wow, are you serious? I'm like, yes, I'm not like the alcohol police, right? I think if you can drink responsibly, like that's on you to decide like how you do that. But the point is like 20% of your calories shouldn't be coming from alcohol. And we talked about like some of the maybe the misconceptions that might be out there as far as nutrition. You've been in the game a long time, over 20 years. And before the internet, before, social media took over, and now there's information on training, on fat loss, on everything that's being thrown at them left and right on Instagram and stuff like that. And you've also built your own platform and have a great following there. Like what's the biggest misconception that you see right now online that maybe some of your clients have come to you and be like, hey, Don, like, what do you think of this? I think I'm going to try that. Or even just some of the content that you've seen, like what's the biggest load of BS that you've seen?
I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there, right? But I think it's also understanding that I like really categorizing there's coaches and then there's influencers. I think they're different people. Of course, a coach can have influence, but I think there's a lot of more influencers out there that are just showing what works for them. And I think this gets very attractive for people. And they see it like, oh, wow, I want to look like that. I want to have those abs, or let me do what that person does. And it's so inconclusive, right? Like just looking at a training program and not really understanding what the rate of perceived exertion is, or tempo, or, when you look at 4 sets of 10, what's that really telling you? Like, what is that telling you? Well, how did you train 4 sets of 10? Are you literally, is someone holding a gun to your head saying, if you don't get 10 reps, I'm going to shoot you? Because that's a different approach than someone just cruising through 10 reps, right? Like so I think there's a lot of inconclusive information out there when it comes to what's being delivered. I've always hated the whole no carb approach. People will metabolize things a little bit differently. And I think you always have your rare cases of someone that needs to be in a low carb diet. But I also understand that when people start ridding their body of carbs and they stop, consuming them, they're really just dehydrating their muscle of water. For every gram of carbs you pull in, you're pulling it up to about 3 grams of water. So it's very easy to turn around and remove carbs and say, oh, I'm losing weight. And then, someone goes to Vegas and they go party for a night or two and they retain all that water back into their body. So I think these are really misconceptions that's been going on. I mean, I can't keep hearing, oh, carbs are bad, or because that's nonsense, or, oh, to burn fat, you need cardio. I'm like, really? Like, that's interesting, because I thought putting on muscle is going to, help increase your resting metabolic rate and help increase the amount of fat calories that you burn. But you'll go into gyms and you'll just see people on ellipticals for an hour a day, wondering why they're not seeing any results. So I think that's not to knock, or that's not to bash cardio. I love doing cardio. I do a lot of cardio because I enjoy it, right? But I also have to understand that if I keep doing cardio and I keep putting myself into a deficit, there's a cost of doing business as well, from that approach.
Right. You'll hear some of the trainers, like even like yourself or others that I've just seen that have been in the game for a long time, call out some of these people who have never trained anybody. Like they're like, these people have like, based on what they're saying, they've never worked with a client. And that's like one of the biggest things that I've seen is like, man, like I deal with this stuff day in and day out as I'm still in the trenches working with the average person, right? Where they're coming to me with struggles on adherence. Like, how do I just make take the first step? Or they're like, hey, I want to try this 3-day cleanse, this 30-day challenge. Like, what do you think? And I'm helping them like kind of like go through a lot of this to point out like what is realistic and what's not. Right.
Listen, I couldn't agree with you anymore. I mean, unfortunately, I think that's the first thing people need to understand. I mean, go to a coach, right? Like find a coach. Like if you're going to ask information or you're going to do a program, and I've seen very successful people on the internet who, ended up getting a certification later on because, they were getting called out for it. And that I think is bad. Like there has to be a higher standard that things are being held to. But on the other hand, you know what? If so-and-so, I'm going to make a name up right now, this person doesn't exist, but Mary Smith, turns around and is able to get, 5,000 people off the couch and moving better. And, she's developing a community and no one's getting hurt. Okay. Like, who am I to say that's a bad thing either? Right. So, I think it really depends on the individual, but there's some really, I'll quote my friend, Charlie Weingroff, there's some offensive stuff going on out there. And I think just the the average, daily social media viewer, it's not their job to know. I can't even blame them. Like, how would they know? They're looking at someone with a good body on them, and they're just assuming that they know what they're doing.
Right. I mean, it's true. I mean, and I've been there, I guess, even in my early days before I became a trainer. I was like always looking at, I mean, even reading like Muscle and Fitness, men's health, and I would see like these guys' bodies, and I was like, man, I want that. And then like I either become friends with people like that who did like shoots like that, or I just started to like learn more about what it took. And then you realize that, I mean, most people, A, don't look like that year round. B, the work that goes into that is insane. And C, like you'll talk to some of these people, and it's not like when they got to that place that their life was perfect and they had this insane level of fulfillment and happiness that just they maintain forever, which is what most people think. Most people think once I get this body and look a certain way, like my troubles are going to go away.
Oh yeah, no, I don't think I've ever turned around and said, "Oh, I'm there." Right? Like it's for me, it's more about the daily grind. Do I enjoy the product that I'm creating, and do I enjoy looking a certain way? I'm not going to tell you I don't. I'd be lying, but I really enjoy more of the daily effort. I really enjoy more of the process. I really enjoy more of what it's doing to me up here. I enjoy getting together with, my team that I work out with a lot, and, us just going in there and pushing each other, and just, it's that feeling that you leave with. And I think that's another mistake when people are just so, set on a specific goal. They're just like, oh, I got to get there. It can also add a lot of stress, and it can also really clutter your vision, where if you just obsessed a little bit more in the process of what you need to do to get there, I think you're going to be better off, right? Like, just wake up today. Like, what do you need to do to get to single digit body fat? All right. Well, stop telling me that you got to lose weight. Stop telling me how much time do you think I'm going to get this done in? Like, those are nonsense questions. Like, why don't you just go in and do everything I'm asking you to do today? And if you could do that, and the next day hit the repeat button, and the next day hit the repeat button, and when you start adding up, all of those, non-scale victories, I think you'll turn around and you'll be surprised at what you're able to create.
I love that, man. It's like controlling the controllables and just mastering the fundamentals and staying consistent. And I would imagine that will determine whether somebody like makes this transformation is adherence and discipline and consistency. Like other than what you just shared, as far as like just literally taking it one day at a time and doing like what you've said, like what are some other things that you help people do in order to stay on track and stay disciplined with their approach?
Again, it depends on the individual. I've got a guy I'm working with right now, and I don't really do much one-on-one anymore. I mean, the only one-on-one I really do is charity. So I have a couple of charitable cases that I focus on, and otherwise I'll prep a couple of the celebs for movie roles. But even that, it's minimal. So, I'm not working with a lot of people anymore. But I have this one guy who came to me at about 512 pounds. And with him, it was a very easy, well, how many steps you get in a day? 400. Okay. How many glasses of water are you get in a day? 2. Okay. So we just upped water intake, and we got him up to like 6,000 steps a day now, and, removed processed foods, and he's lost, a boatload of weight. He's probably close around 50 pounds now in the last couple of months. So, I think with someone like that, it's, well, what do you want me to start measuring? I'm like, no, I just want you to stay here. And we're in this honeymoon phase where things are happening. I don't have to go into my bag of tricks and start pulling things out, or start adding all this unwanted stress into your life that is going to force you to not be as consistent. It's working. Don't change it. I think that's a big problem that a lot of people will face. Like the example I gave before was when I dropped my carbs to 300 grams, 275 grams of protein and 90 grams of fat, from 275 grams of protein, 500 grams of carbs, and 125 grams of fat. So when I dropped those fats and carbohydrates, I lost like 7 or 8 pounds in the first week. And I'm sitting there talking to a buddy of mine, and I'm like, yeah, I'm thinking I'm probably going to adjust it again. And he's like, why? And I just started laughing. I was like, oh my God, like he's like, just why are you going to adjust? Why are you going to go into more of a deficit, go into the potential flattening out? Like, your body's already seeing so much progress. Just stay there. So I did. So week 1, I lost 7 or 8 pounds. And then week 2, I think I lost a pound. Week 3, I lost a pound. And week 4, I lost a pound. So we're looking at probably 10, 11 pounds. But what I really noticed, rather than the weight loss, was just like vascularity in my neck and my upper chest and my abdominals. Every day I was waking up and I was like, where did that come from? Right. But I wouldn't have had that if I jumped the gun and I started, removing even more calories, removing even more carbs, because then I would have flattened out. I would have. It's a term bodybuilders use where you don't lose, you lose that fullness, and my energy level would have went to crap. And the thing I prided myself on any shoot I've ever been in was I did a contest prep one, like a true contest prep once back in 2014. I said I would never do it again because I didn't want to dehydrate water. And there's too many things going on with timing. At the end of the day, there's so many variables where I didn't really, was it that much of a difference? Wasn't really noticeable. Maybe I noticed it, but there's too many variables that could cause me to make a mistake or wake up that next day and be like, oh my God, I blew it. Like I look worse, right? So I don't dehydrate myself and I don't rid my body of carbohydrates. I clean things up. I get rid of cheat meals. I get rid of alcohol. I really dial in my macronutrients, and I continue to train really heavy, which is a huge misconception. People are, oh, I have to get leaner. I have to up reps. I'm like, no, train heavy, especially if you're natural. If you're a natty, you need to continue to work on that muscle density, and your body's going to respond much differently to someone that's on anabolics. So, again, misconceptions. Oh, I got to go high reps to get leaner. Like, it's nonsense, like bullshit. Like, you can get leaner doing low reps. Like, it doesn't make it, like, actually, I question it because you have to create so much more tension when you're going heavier in your overall system. The tension techniques that are being required to have to stabilize is really, it's demanding a lot out of your body. So, yeah, I mean, I know some of the strongest I've ever gotten have been going into the week of a shoot when most people are going to be like, oh my God, I'm just completely exhausted and I'm wiped. I'm like, no, my inflammation's down. Everything's dialed in. Mentally, I feel like I'm in a great place and I'm pulling PRs, So it's a different approach. But again, I'm not a competitive bodybuilder. I'm not getting on the stage at the Olympia. Different story, different conversation for someone who's going through that than someone like myself.
And it just seems, from what I understand from hearing from people like you and some others that are pretty well educated and have a lot of experience with this, like, you want to definitely keep protein high, and you want to lift heavy, and you want to be consistent, and I guess be realistic with your expectations. So for the average person, let's just say, like, I mean, you hear this, I'm sure you hear this a lot, or you have heard this a lot in your career, like, hey, like, I got a vacation coming up in August. I have a vacation coming up in September. Like, what's a realistic time frame that, let's just talk about like the average person who wants to maybe lose like 15 to 20 pounds and look better in a bikini, look better with their shirt off at the beach. Like what's the time frame look like?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's what are we dealing with here, right? Like, what's that starting point? I know it's not the answer that you want to hear, but yeah, I really believe if you're able to clean up calories consumed and you're able to show a level of consistency, good things are going to happen, right? Like, and I think for someone who's trying to get beach ready, remove the alcohol for a while, remove the processed foods, remove the breads, remove the sugars. That itself, I mean, I've seen, someone who looks like athletic, I'll see him in the first week or two lose 5 to 7 pounds. That's someone who's athletic and doesn't necessarily, have a high level of body fat. It's like an athletic looking individual. So I know just from water retention and inflammation, if you clean things up, but again, people don't, want that answer. They want something that's going to fit their lifestyle, and that's fine. But like, they're not also going to get into the shape they want to get into. It's like, there is an answer to all these questions. Like, if you're someone who wants to take their shirt off and everyone will go, oh, that person looks athletic, they look great. Like, all right, like, you want to be on a cover of, of a magazine, that's a different answer. If you want to be on stage, that's a different answer. Like, there's all different requirements for, these things that we're trying to demand out of the body. But, I really believe, you need, weeks to months to really allow the body to make some significant change. Now, have I done change for people in 2 to 4 weeks? Absolutely. They're coming in, pretty decent shape, and there's just fine tuning that's going on. But you can lose a significant amount of body fat and body weight, in not a lot of time if you take an approach. But if you're one of these people who are like, well, my doctor said I can have a glass of wine every night. Like, okay, your doctor said that. Like, different answers to different questions here. Like, that's just to live a healthy lifestyle of moderation and balance. But if you're truly trying to get to that single digit body fat level and you've struggled to get there, you need some type of consistency out of the gate. You need to be monitoring this for weeks. Because if every day things are all over the place, how are you going to know what's working? How are you going to know how to adjust? And that's the problem. People they don't know how to make adjustments because they get 5 days in and they're like, oh, I need a refeed. I'm carb depleted. Like, you're going to be fine. Are you following me? So I think it's just having this level of patience and allowing the process to kick in.
For most people, if they're listening to this and they're getting their workouts in, they're lifting heavy, they're getting some good strength training, they're probably going to be good in that department, right? But I think if they're doing that and then their nutrition is like up and down, like you just said, it's going to throw everything off. And I think that's probably fundamentally more important to get that dialed in first. Would you agree?
I used to agree with that, but I have taken a little bit of a different approach. I just try and get people motivated, right? Like if having them eat perfectly or trying to get them to eat a certain way while they're training sometimes can be a lot for someone to handle out of the gate, right? Like I said with this guy who was 512 pounds, like I just removed certain things. Like I don't know how much protein he's getting in. Like I don't, I know he's eating, 3-4 times a day, and he's seeing such an incredible amount of progress just by getting his steps in, et cetera. So sometimes I think going at someone and throwing the kitchen sink at them is the worst thing to do. Or sometimes turning around and giving them that diet that you work on could be the worst thing to do. I think you really got to understand who you're working with, and I think you got to go in there and be a little bit mindful that if you give them too much, you can screw them up. And you got to look at their track record. This is someone who's they're 60 years old and they've never been able to nail this. Like how long have you been trying this for? Decades? Okay, what have you been trying? Like understand, get into their psyche a bit, and then at that point, it's if I'm realizing that they just have not been able to be consistent, I'm going to back off a little bit. And I'm just going to try and show them a level of progress and then slowly start building on that.
Right. No, I completely agree that you don't want to throw the kitchen sink at them and have them be perfect. I guess what I was asking, maybe I didn't ask this clearly, is that I think you mentioned that you want to be able to have time to adjust. If you're somebody who is trying to lean out, or if you're somebody who's trying to like reach some sort of physique or fitness goal, and if you set the time frame too short, you don't really allow for that adjustment period to see like, okay, like do you tolerate better with more carbs, less carbs, like more fat, what works for your body, I guess. So like my question is like, how do you get somebody, like what's the first step to get somebody to know like where they're at? Like how can somebody begin to know like what works best for them?
Measuring macros sometimes can be, people will say it's overwhelming for them. I think it kind of de-stresses me because I have an understanding of what's going into my body. But I think once people understand and they journal for a few days and they look at what's actually, what they're actually consuming day in and day out, then you can start poking holes and say, listen, like your protein was as high, and this week it was as high as 200 grams, it was as low as 90 grams. Like there's a problem there. There's just way too much variability in that. So, I think it's understanding where that baseline is. And if that baseline is not measuring macros and it's through measuring through your palm, your hand, your fist, your thumb, then fine, that's a baseline, but stay consistent with it. And then I think I like to give people about 2 weeks of and no cheat meals in 2 weeks, like 2 weeks of nailing this, developing some consistency. And then you ask questions. All right, well, how you feeling? Energy's great. How are your clothes fitting you? Looser. How's your sleep? Sleep's awesome. Okay, great. Let's keep doing what we're doing. Like those are some good signs there, right? Or even if someone's like, well, I gained a pound. I'm like, okay, well, we also increase your carbs and your body's, getting adapted to this, to this new macronutrient that you haven't been consuming. So let's give it some time and see if your body levels off. So I do know that it depends on the individual, but we got to give it some time. I like saying about 2 weeks allows me to be able to make an adjustment. And a lot of times if they're doing well, I'm like, all right, just keep your foot on the gas. And it doesn't sound sexy, right? Like it doesn't sound like, like, all right, like, no, we've got to learn. We've got to learn about our bodies now. But as I start getting that data and I start learning about the individual, then I can make, some important decisions moving forward on where their macros need to be.
All right. Yeah, that makes sense. So as far as like nutrition calculators, you see that a lot online where even with like MyFitnessPal, and I don't know if my Apple Watch does it or not, but you'll see people, they'll plug in their numbers and they'll tell them how many calories they need to eat. Like, what is your thought on those? Or do you have a better approach for the person who's listening to this? It's like, hey, how many calories do I want to at least try to start with if I'm trying to track things?
Well, first off, I love Chronometer. That's my favorite company out there. They're the most accurate. They're data driven, and all their data in there is pretty much spot on. So I love Chronometer. I'm a huge Chronometer fan. I think it's understanding, again, where is your activity level at, right? Because if you're consuming the activity level of someone who's sedentary, but you should be consuming the calories of an activity level of someone who's, moderate activity level, well, that's pretty far off, right? Because it'll go sedentary, it'll go light activity, moderate activity, and it works its way up. So if you're consuming sedentary and you're only consuming 1,500 calories a day, but you need to be consuming 2,500 calories a day to hit your total daily energy expenditure, then I think we got to take some time building it up, and not rushing to get up to that level and see what happens with our body. Spend weeks, spend a month or so, just slowly, very methodically. It's only math, right? Like if you got 1,000 calories to increase, what have you been consuming? Like if you're a small female that can't eat a lot, like that might take us 10 weeks at 100 calories a week. Like she might not be able to consume that much more, but I think it's really assessing, it's analyzing how the body's responding over time. And then we're able to make adjustments.
Yeah. I mean, you make some great points there. And I think that's like one of the biggest takeaways, I think, for people listening is that there is no like overnight fix. There's no quick fix. You're not going to all of a sudden see something on Instagram or buy this plan and all of a sudden like you're going to lose a bunch of weight in a short amount of time. It's consistency. It's finding out what works for you. It's keeping your head up. It's remaining like optimistic, like in just doing the things that you need to do on a daily basis. And we could spend all day obviously talking about like how to adjust nutrition, how to do this. But I think most people, they struggle with just getting started, like what to do, like sifting through all the information that's online as far as like how to get started on like a program that's going to help me like look the way I want to. And I think you've just laid out like a few good fundamental points specifically on the nutrition side of things. I guess as we kind of bring things to a close, what do you think is from a resistance training perspective? Like, are there things that are non-negotiables with people as far as like frequency? I mean, the person who is just, they have time to go to the gym. Like, is there an approach that you like to use with the average person that can be like essentially like used for anybody?
Yeah. I mean, God, I wish I could give you more solid answers here, but I think it depends on training history. I think it depends on how many days can they get in. I think it depends on sleep quality. I mean, I've worked with Hugh Jackman where we were doing two a days, and I've worked with Andy Hathaway where we would go 3 days a week, right? Like it all works depending on the goal and depending on their work schedule and depending on their stress level. So I do high intensity workouts. I do volume based workouts. I'll train more for frequency, full bodies every day. Like I've done it all. Like there's many ways to kind of, skin a cat here. But I think, again, it's understanding who you're working with on day one. It's all going to work, right? But I think it's understanding on day one, what is this person, what's their training history like? What's their schedule like right now? Like what's going to happen if they're crazy store and they're on set? Is this going to affect their work or is this going to put them in harm's way? So, I think it's interesting because then it allows me really to kind of curate something that's for them. And it's really, is it the best? Well, no, it's what I feel is, as a coach, as having 25 years of experience, 40,000 1-hour sessions, I have probably at least done, it's looking and sitting with the individual and going through a questionnaire and saying, hey, listen, this is the approach you were taking. This is why you didn't like it, or you're telling me you didn't like it. I think we should try this, giving them a little bit of a different approach, which I think it could be motivating within itself. But I mean, I've done it all with training. I like the high volume workouts. I like the high intensity workouts. I like frequency training. It all works. It's all really good. But I think, for each individual, we can curate something a little bit differently depending on what they need.
Right. And what would you say as far as like the programming for like the average like male female, is it different? I mean, I know personally for me, like I love doing like a split routine. I'm just like an old school meathead. I'll probably always like lift like that unless I get injured, which hopefully I don't. But then like there's some people that like doing full body, or there's just people that just like doing more interval stuff to help to build like muscle and that. Like what have you found that works best?
I haven't found anything that works best. I mean, it all works. I feel like anytime I get into a new training block and I commit myself to that training block, I'm suddenly like, oh my God, this is amazing, right? Like I feel great. It's allowing my body some and my mind a little bit of variability, and I really enjoy having something that's a little bit different. On the other hand, I don't like switching things up every day or every week because then I feel like you're not really allowing the body time to improve. If you're always going and throwing different stuff at someone, sometimes I like, being able to quantify a level of improvement if it's strength training. But yeah, if I have someone get on a work capacity program, it'll probably be 3 to 4 weeks tops. Strength powerlifting could be 4 months, right? Hypertrophy, who knows, right? I love kettlebell training. One of the non-negotiables I do believe is practice. Like no matter what, before a training session, we are practicing things that person needs to improve, whether they're a bodybuilder, whether they're an athlete. whether they're getting ready for the red carpet, we're practicing areas, we're practicing to improve areas that they need to improve. And that allows them to be more well-rounded.
It's so true, man, because I think as a trainer, like one of the things that I've seen with people is they want like these cookie cutter answers when it comes to their training. And a lot of it is adaptability and what works for you, time, like how much time do you have every day to train? Like what's your like home life like do you have kids? Like all these things are so important. Like for me, like I'm a single guy, like I don't have kids. Like if I wanted to, I could do 2-a-days, and I probably could if I just, didn't want to do anything else other than focus on my training and train a few clients in the podcast. But I have other goals in mind that it's like, all right, that could be good for a season, but it can't be good for the rest of my life. Well, dude, man, I love talking shop, and I feel like we could talk forever.
That was a good time. I really appreciate you having me on. Let me know when it launches, and I'll throw it up on stories. And again, like I said, I don't even know where the hour went. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, man. So if anybody wants to connect with you and they want to like maybe like just read more about what you have going on, they want to perhaps like meet you in an event, or I know you have like an app I think you're doing stuff with, like where can people do that?
Yeah, I think just go to donsaladino.com. I think that's pretty simple. I mean, I'm on all the social handles, Don Saladino for Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. Like I'm kind of cranking on all those platforms. So, but donsaladino.com is a great place to kind of get filled in on what I'm doing. And again, I can't thank you enough.
Perfect, man. Well, I'll make sure to plug all that stuff in the show notes. And for those listening, what I invite you to do is to share a takeaway. Maybe it was something that Don said about like how he measures success, like talking about the non-scale goals, or maybe it was something that he said about like the misconceptions in the industry or nutrition, adherence, whatever it was. Share the takeaway, tag Don, tag myself, because we'd love to hear your feedback. And we once again thank you for listening to this episode of The Adversity Advantage. I'm your host, Doug Bopst, and we'll see you next time.